Please, doctor, I will stay out of your way. I am just here to clean. Bella knelt on the floor of St. Catherine's operating room, scrubbing blood while resident Brad Sterling laughed. He kicked a bloody gauze pad at her face and called her Maria, though her name was Isabella. Brad didn't know the 55-year-old immigrant cleaner had invented the surgical procedure he was about to botch. 5 years ago, she was Dr. Isabella Moretti, the legendary golden hands of cardiac surgery. Tonight, a senator was dying on the table, and Brad was freezing in panic. The janitor was about to break through security, take the scalpel, and show everyone who she really was. Before watching, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The operating room at St. Catherine's Medical Center was quiet, except for the rhythmic hum of industrial scrubbers. Bella moved the mop across the sterile floor with practiced, invisible efficiency that came from 12-hour shifts. Her back ached constantly, a reminder of her age and the punishment she'd chosen for herself. She kept her head down always, her gray hair tucked under a cheap hospital-issued cap. To the staff rushing past her, she was just the cleaner, a ghost in the machine of modern medicine. "Hey, Maria! Did you sterilize the sink?" Brad Sterling shouted from the scrub station without looking at her. He never called her Bella, never asked her real name, never saw her as human. To him, all immigrant cleaners were Maria, interchangeable and beneath his notice entirely. "Yes, doctor, it is clean," Bella replied, her voice thick with an Italian accent she no longer tried to hide. "Good. Now get out of my sight," Brad dismissed her with a wave. "I have a VIP procedure in 20 minutes, and I don't want you cluttering my air with poverty." Bella nodded silently and pushed her cart toward the hallway, head down, shoulders hunched. She'd by the observation window, looking at the surgical schedule displayed on monitors in OR1. She saw the procedure listed: aortic valve replacement, lead surgeon, Dr. Brad Sterling, resident. She watched Brad through the window, practicing his sutures in the air, his movements jerky and uncertain. Too much wrist, Bella thought automatically. He will tear the tissue if he moves like that. He's compensating for weak fingers by using force instead of finesse, exactly what kills patients. She sighed deeply and pushed the thought away with practiced determination, just like every other day. That life was over now, buried 5 years ago with her daughter Sophia in Woodlawn Cemetery. 5 years ago, she was Dr. Isabella Moretti, chief of cardiothoracic surgery, at this very hospital. She was the golden hands of New York, the surgeon other surgeons called when they needed miracles. Presidents and senators had trusted her with their hearts, literally placed their lives in her steady hands. Until the night her own daughter, Sophia, was brought into this hospital after a drunk driver's collision. The smell of antiseptic hit Bella's nose suddenly, and the hallway around her blurred and shifted. She wasn't in the corridor anymore. She was standing in OR3 5 years ago, 2:15 a.m. Sophia was on the table, 23 years old, her dark hair matted with blood from the accident. "Dr. Moretti, you can't operate on your own daughter," Dr. Harrison had said, gripping her shoulder firmly. "It's against hospital policy, and you know why. Let me take her, please." But Isabella had looked at the monitors, had seen the aortic dissection on the emergency scan. Type A dissection, extensive, the kind that kills in minutes if you hesitate even once during repair. She was the only surgeon in the building that night who had successfully repaired this exact injury. "I am the best chance she has," Isabella had said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "And I will not let my daughter die because of a policy written by administrators who never hold scalpels." She had scrubbed in, her hands moving through the ritual automatically despite the screaming in her mind. She had made the incision, had opened Sophia's chest, had seen the damage with her surgeon's eyes. The tear was worse than the scan had shown, extending further up the ascending aorta than expected. She had cooled Sophia's body, had stopped her heart, had worked in the terrible silence of suspended animation. Her hands had moved with their usual precision, placing each suture exactly where it needed to be. But the tissue was too damaged, too friable, tearing with each stitch like wet paper under thread. She had tried everything, every technique she'd pioneered, every trick she'd learned in 30 years of surgery. But Sophia's aorta wouldn't hold, kept tearing, kept bleeding, the damage too extensive to repair. Isabella had stood there watching the monitor flatline, hearing that terrible continuous tone that meant death. She had screamed then, a sound she didn't recognize as coming from her own throat. Other surgeons had pulled her away from the table as she'd collapsed, her legs refusing to hold her. She had failed the one person she loved more than surgery, more than medicine, more than life itself. The smell of floor cleaner brought Bella back to the present hallway, her hands gripping the mop handle. She was 55 now, not 50, and Sophia had been gone for 5 years of crushing, endless grief. She had resigned her position the next day, had walked away from surgery with nothing but guilt. She had changed her name, had taken the lowest job she could find at this same hospital. She wanted to be near the machines, near the rhythm of medicine, but far from the responsibility. Far from the possibility of failing another patient, another person, another daughter she couldn't save. She walked to the staff locker room, changing into her street clothes slowly, her joints protesting. Her tiny studio apartment in Queens was waiting, silent and empty, just the way she deserved. She lit a candle in front of Sophia's photograph, a ritual she performed every evening without fail. "I saw a young doctor today, Kara," she whispered to the photo of Sophia's smiling face. "He has so much arrogance, but no hands, no skill. He reminds me of me before I learned." She ate her simple dinner of canned soup and stale bread, staring at her own trembling hands. These were the hands that had saved thousands of lives over 30 years of relentless surgical perfection. But they were also the hands that had lost the one life that mattered most to her. Outside her small window, a storm was building over the city, thunder rattling the thin glass. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table, the sound harsh in the apartment's heavy silence. A text from the night shift supervisor. "Emergency. All cleaning staff return immediately. Mass trauma incoming." Bella blew out Sophia's candle carefully, touched the photograph once more, and stood up slowly. One more shift, she whispered to the empty apartment, to Sophia's memory, to her own guilt. "Just to clean. That is all I can do now. Just clean up other people's messes." The emergency room at St. Catherine's was a war zone of shouting voices and urgent beeping alarms. A motorcade had crashed on Riverside Expressway during the storm, multiple vehicles involved in the pileup. Senator James Winston, a frontrunner for the upcoming presidential election, was the primary critical victim. Paramedics wheeled him in on a gurney, his expensive suit torn and completely soaked in his own blood. Blood pressure is 60/40. Pulse is thready and weakening, a paramedic screamed over the chaos. "Where the hell is Dr. Reynolds?" a senior nurse shouted, looking desperately around for the chief of surgery. "He's in Hawaii at a conference. All flights are grounded because of the storm," another nurse yelled back. Brad Sterling stepped forward through the chaos, his face pale but his eyes gleaming with contained ambition. This was it, he thought, his heart racing with excitement rather than appropriate fear for the patient. This was the moment that would make his entire career. Would put his name in every medical journal. CNN would cover this. The New York Times would interview him. He'd be chief of surgery by 35. "I am the senior resident on call tonight. I will take charge of this case," Brad announced loudly. "But Dr. Sterling, this is a type aortic dissection," a nurse argued, looking at the portable scan. "That's extremely complex surgery. Maybe we should wait for Dr. Patel to come in from Brooklyn?" "I said I will handle it. Prep OR1 immediately," Brad barked, his ego overriding any reasonable caution. Behind the senator's gurney, a young woman was sobbing uncontrollably, her whole body shaking with terror. It was the senator's daughter, Sarah Winston, roughly the same age Sophia had been when she died. "Please, save my dad! He's all I have left! Please!" she screamed, reaching out toward anyone who would listen. Her desperate, terrified eyes locked with Bella's, who was mopping up a trail of blood near the entrance. "Help him!" The girl's eyes seemed to plead directly to Bella's soul across the crowded emergency room. Bella felt a physical jolt in her chest, like a defibrillator, shocking her heart back into rhythm. The trauma she had carefully buried for 5 years clawed its way up through the layers of guilt. She followed the gurney to the elevator, her heart pounding for the first time in years with something beyond grief. In the surgical prep room, Brad was staring at the CT scans displayed on the wall-mounted monitors. His hands were shaking visibly as he studied the images, and sweat was forming on his forehead. He was looking at the scan, but he wasn't seeing the solution, wasn't understanding the complexity. It's too extensive, Brad whispered to himself, his confidence cracking like thin ice under pressure. I can't clamp this. If I clamp the aorta, it will rupture. But if I don't clamp... Doctor, the patient is crashing! Blood pressure dropping, the anesthesiologist yelled from the adjacent operating room. Brad froze completely, all the arrogance draining from his face, leaving only naked, paralyzing fear. He was a boy playing God, and he was about to kill a United States senator on live surgical theater. Bella stood in the doorway, clutching her mop bucket, watching him panic, and she knew exactly what to do. The Moretti method for type A dissections, a technique she had pioneered 15 years ago for this exact injury. It required cooling the patient to 18 degrees Celsius and stopping all circulation completely for the repair. Brad didn't know it, had never learned it, was going to try a standard repair that would kill the senator. Bella looked at the monitor showing the Snyder's vital signs, watched the heart rate plummeting steadily. She looked back at the doorway where Sarah was crying, held back by nurses, begging for her father's life. She saw Sophia's face superimposed over Sarah's, heard Sophia's voice saying, "Mom, you have to try." Bella dropped the mop handle and it clattered loudly on the tile floor, echoing in the tense silence. The sound of the falling mop snapped Brad out of his frozen trance for just a moment. "What are you doing here? Get out of the prep room!" Brad screamed at her, his voice cracking. Bella walked past the sterile line deliberately, ignoring the shocked gasps of the surgical nurses watching. "You cannot clamp the aorta directly, doctor," Bella said, her voice low and steady and absolutely certain. "The tissue is friable from the trauma. You will tear it. He will bleed out in 90 seconds. Brad stared at her with his mouth hanging open, unable to process what was happening right now. "Excuse me, did the janitor just give surgical advice?" He laughed, the sound hysterical and unhinged. "What's next? The cafeteria lady diagnosing cancer? The parking attendant performing brain surgery?" "I am telling you how to save his life," Bella sighed, stepping closer, her Italian accent thickening with urgency. "You must use deep, hypothermic circulatory arrest. Cool him to 18 degrees. Stop his heart completely. Cannulate the femoral artery for bypass. Then repair the dissection in a bloodless field. It is the only way." Brad's face twisted with rage and something deeper, something like terror that she knew what she was talking about. "You crazy immigrant witch! You don't even speak proper English?" Brad shrieked, his control completely gone now. "Security! Security! Get this woman out of here immediately. She's contaminating my sterile environment. And fire her! I want her badge revoked and I want her deported by morning." 2 large security guards rushed into the prep room, grabbing Bella firmly by both arms. "No! You must listen to me! Please!" Bella shouted, struggling against their grip for the first time in years. "Deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. It is the Moretti method. Look it up." "Get her out of my sight!" Brad shrieked, his face purple with rage and fear combined. The guards began dragging Bella toward the double doors as she fought against them desperately. Beep, 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 beep. The flatline tone cut through all the shouting like a knife through silk, freezing everyone instantly. "Cardiac arrest! We just lost his pulse!" The anesthesiologist yelled from the operating room in pure panic. Brad stood there holding a scalpel, completely paralyzed, staring at the chest he was supposed to open. He looked at the patient, then at the monitor, then at his own shaking hands that wouldn't obey him. He didn't move, couldn't move, his entire body locked in place by overwhelming, crushing fear. "Doctor, do something! He's dying!" A surgical nurse screamed, her voice desperate and rising in pitch. The patient was dying, the senator was dying, Brad's career was ending, Sarah would lose her father forever. Bella saw the fear in Brad's eyes and recognized it completely. From 5 years ago in this same hospital. It was the same fear she had felt when Sophia's aorta tore under her sutures and wouldn't stop bleeding. But she wasn't that broken woman anymore. Wasn't the surgeon who had given up after one failure. She twisted her body suddenly, using a judo throw technique she'd learned years ago for hospital self-defense. The guard on her right stumbled forward, surprised by her movement, losing his grip on her arm completely. Bella pivoted and elbowed the guard on her left hard in the solar plexus with all her strength. He gasped and released her, backing away, and Bella was free for just a few critical seconds. She didn't run toward the exit doors, like they expected, didn't try to escape from the hospital. Instead, she ran directly toward the operating room table, toward the dying senator, toward her purpose. "Stop her! Someone stop that crazy woman!" Brad yelled, backing away as Bella charged past him. Bella didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second now. She grabbed a sterile surgical gown from the rack and shoved her arms in with practiced, automatic efficiency. She grabbed sterile gloves from the dispenser, snapping them on in under 3 seconds with muscle memory. The surgical team stood frozen, watching this cleaning woman transform into something else entirely before their eyes. "Step away from the table, boy," Bella commanded, her voice no longer Maria the cleaner's voice. This was Dr. Moretti's voice, the voice that had commanded operating rooms for 30 years with absolute authority. Brad was so shocked by the transformation, by the pure authority radiating from this woman, that he stepped back. Bella snatched the scalpel from his trembling hand without asking permission or waiting for him to surrender it. "Time of incision, 0247, she announced clearly to the room, her training taking over completely. "Bypass pump on. Cool to 18 degrees Celsius. Someone give me the bone saw immediately." The surgical team stared at her, completely frozen, unable to process what was happening in this moment. "I said give me the saw!" Bella's voice cracked like a whip through their paralysis. "Unless you want to explain to CNN why a United States Senator died on your table." The scrub nurse, acting purely on instinct trained over 20 years in operating rooms, slapped the saw into Bella's hand. Bella cut through the sternum in one smooth, perfect motion, no wasted movement, no hesitation, just pure skill. The bone separated cleanly under her blade, the saw singing its familiar high-pitched song of surgery. "Retractors," she ordered, her hands already moving to the next step before anyone could fully react. 2 nurses jumped to obey her, placing the retractors exactly where her gesturing hands indicated. Bella looked directly at the damage inside the senator's chest and assessed it with her trained surgeon's eyes. The aorta was completely shredded, worse than the CT scan had shown, already starting to tear further. "I need a Dacron graft, size 28 millimeters, she ordered, without looking up from the surgical field. "And give me 4-0 proline sutures. Prepare the arterial cannula for femoral bypass. Move!" "Who are you?" the anesthesiologist whispered, watching her hands move with a speed and precision he'd never seen. "I am the surgeon," Bella replied without looking up, her hands already beginning the delicate repair work. She began to sew the graft into place, her fingers moving like hummingbirds across the torn aortic tissue. They moved so fast, they were almost impossible to track, each movement precise and economical and absolutely perfect. She was performing the anastomosis, the connection of the artificial graft to the natural artery, with impossible speed. Brad watched from the corner where he'd retreated, his face pale as death, his career crumbling around him. He recognized the stitching pattern suddenly, the specific complex weave she was creating with the sutures. That's the Moretti stitch," he whispered, his eyes widening with dawning, horrible realization. "Only one person in the world does that exact pattern. But she's gone. She disappeared 5 years ago." "Suction here," Bella ordered, not responding to his whisper, focused entirely on the work before her. "We are warming him up now. Prepare to come off bypass in 90 seconds. The room held its collective breath as the temperature slowly climbed on the monitor displays. The flat line on the heart monitor wavered once, then twice. Then nothing for several terrible seconds. "Come off bypass in 3, 2, 1, now," Bella said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The monitor showed nothing but a flat green line. No heartbeat, no electrical activity, just silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity compressed into 3 seconds, a small blip appeared on the screen. That lasted forever while everyone in the matter room held their breath and prayed silently. Beep. Another, shorter this time, and then a steady, strong, beautiful rhythm emerged from the silence. Beep, 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 beep. Sinus rhythm restored, the anesthesiologist gasped, his voice thick with disbelief and overwhelming relief. Blood pressure is stabilizing at 90/60 and climbing. He's back. Oh my God, he's actually back. Bella tied the final knot in the suture lineand, cut the thread with steady, practiced hands. She placed her instruments down carefully on the sterile tray and stepped back from the table slowly. "Close him up," she told the stunned resident standing across from her, a young woman frozen in shock. She pulled off her bloody gloves and threw them in the biohazard bin with practiced, automatic motion. She turned slowly to face Brad, who was nose shrinking against the wall like a child caught stealing. "You can clamp your ego now, doctor," Bella said quietly, her voice carrying perfectly in the silent room. The double doors to the operating room burst open suddenly, with a crash that made everyone jump. Dr. Arthur Harrison, the hospital chief of staff, ran into the room, dripping wet from the storm outside. He had driven through flooded streets at dangerous speeds when he'd heard about the senator's critical condition. "What happened? Is Senator Winston alive?" Harrison demanded, looking around the room desperately for answers. He saw the steady rhythm on the monitor, saw the surgical team beginning to close the chest. "Thank God," Harrison sighed, his shoulder sagging with relief, his worst fears not realized after all. "Good work, Sterling. I knew I could count on you in a crisis situation." Brad opened his mouth to take the credit, to accept the praise, but no sound came out at all. His throat was closed, his conscience finally awake after years of sleeping through his arrogant career. Harrison looked around the operating room, taking in the scene more carefully now, noticing something wrong. He saw Bella standing by the biohazard bin, removing her surgical gown slowly and deliberately. She was wearing her gray janitor's uniform underneath the sterile surgical garments, impossible to miss. Harrison frowned deeply, confusion crossing his face, then recognition beginning to dawn in his eyes. He knew that posture, that way of standing, had seen it 1,000 times over 20 years. "Wait," Harrison said slowly, walking toward her carefully, as if approaching something fragile. "I know that stance, I know those hands, but it can't be." Bella turned around to face him directly, her face weary but calm, no longer hiding anything. Harrison stopped dead in his tracks, his mouth falling open, his eyes widening with complete shock. "Isabella?" he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion and disbelief combined. "Hello, Arthur," Bella said softly, using his first name for the first time in 5 years. "My God," Harrison gasped, taking another step closer as if making sure she was really real. "Isabella Moretti, we thought you had moved to Europe. We thought you'd left medicine completely." "I moved to Queens," Bella corrected with a small, sad smile. "And I never left this building. I have been here every day, cleaning your floors." Harrison's eyes filled with tears, as the full weight of what she was saying hit him like a physical blow. You did this surgery?" Harrison asked, gesturing at the senator's now stable body on the table. "Someone had to," Bella said simply, glancing at Brad, who was trying to become invisible against the wall. Harrison turned slowly to Brad, his face hardening into an expression of profound fury and disappointment. "Sterling, did you let a member of the custodial staff perform emergency surgery?" Harrison asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "No. I mean, she just jumped in. She broke through security," Brad stammered, his career ending with each word. "She attacked me. She contaminated the sterile field, She should be arrested. She saved him because you froze like a coward, the scrub nurse spoke up suddenly, her voice clear and strong. Dr. Sterling was paralyzed with fear. The patient was dying. Dr. Moretti saved the senator's life. Harrison looked at Brad with the kind of disappointment that ends careers and destroys reputations permanently. You nearly killed a United States senator because of your pride and incompetence? Harrison asked. And you treated the greatest cardiac surgeon of her generation like she was garbage beneath your feet? I didn't know, Brad cried, tears starting to run down his face now, his composure completely shattered. She was just a janitor. How was I supposed to know? She never said anything. She is a legend, Harrison shouted, his voice echoing off the operating room walls with righteous anger. Dr. Isabella Moretti pioneered half the cardiac procedures we use in this hospital every single day. And you are finished here. Get out of my operating room immediately. Brad looked desperately at Bella, waiting for her to mock him, to destroy him with cutting words. But Bella just looked at him with something that looked uncomfortably like pity in her tired eyes. Medicine is service, not status, Dr. Sterling, she told him quietly, her voice gentle despite everything. You looked at my uniform and made assumptions. You should have looked at my hands. Learn humility, and maybe one day you can actually be a doctor instead of just playing one. Brad hung his head, unable to meet her eyes, and walked out of the operating room in complete shame. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the hallway, fading away into nothing, taking his career with them. 2 hours later, Senator Winston was awake in the ICU, groggy from anesthesia but alive and stable. His daughter Sarah was sitting by his bedside, holding his hand tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. Bella stood in the doorway of the ICU room, dressed again in her gray janitor's street clothes. Dr. Harrison stood beside her, still processing everything that had happened in the last few hours. The board of directors wants you back, Isabella, Harrison said quietly, not looking at her directly. Full reinstatement as chief of cardiothoracic surgery. You can name your terms, your salary, whatever you want. Bella looked at Sarah, hugging her father, watched the girl's relief and joy at having him back alive. She reached up and touched the silver locket around her neck, the one containing Sophia's photograph inside. For 5 years, she had punished herself by cleaning floors, by being invisible, by refusing to save lives. She had thought that saving lives would remind her of her failure, would make Sophia's death hurt even more. But tonight, watching Sarah with her father, she realized something that had eluded her for 5 years. Saving lives wasn't a reminder of her failure. It was the only way to honor Sophia's memory properly. I don't want the chief position back, Bella sighed finally, still watching Sarah and the senator together. I want to run the surgical residency program. I want to teach the next generation. I want to teach them that the patient is the only thing that ever matters in medicine. Done. Harrison agreed immediately, without hesitation, knowing it was exactly what the hospital needed desperately. Bella walked slowly into the ICU room, and Sarah looked up immediately, recognizing her face instantly. You, Sarah whispered, her eyes widening with recognition and something like wonder. You're the cleaner. You were in the emergency room. I saw you. I was a cleaner, Bella smiled, the first genuine smile that had crossed her face in 5 years. But tonight, I remembered what I really am. I am a surgeon. I am a teacher. Thank you, Sarah sobbed, standing up and hugging Bella tightly, despite not knowing her at all. You gave me my dad back. You saved his life when everyone else gave up. Bella held the girl carefully, feeling Sophia in her arms for just a moment, then letting her go. And you gave me my life back, child, Bella whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. You reminded me why I became a surgeon in the first place. To save daughters, fathers. 6 months passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant for everyone at St. Catherine's. A new group of first-year surgical residents stood nervously in the main lecture hall, waiting for orientation. They wore crisp, new white coats that still smelled like the packaging they'd arrived in yesterday. The door at the front of the lecture hall opened, and Dr. Isabella Moretti walked in slowly. She wore a pristine white coat with her name embroidered in gold thread on the left breast. But in her pocket, carefully folded, she carried a small piece of gray fabric from her old cleaning uniform. A reminder of who she had been, and who she would never let herself become again. She stood at the podium and looked out at the young, eager, terrified faces staring back at her. "Welcome to St. Catherine's Medical Center," she began, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. "Before we begin your surgical training, I want you all to do something very simple for me. Look at your hands. Right now, look at them carefully." The residents looked down at their hands obediently, confused but following her instruction without question. "These are not tools for building your ego or advancing your career," Bella said, her voice stern now. "They are not weapons to wave around to prove your superiority over nurses or support staff. These hands are instruments of mercy. They exist to serve patients, not to serve yourselves. If you ever forget that fundamental truth, if you ever treat a patient or a colleague with cruelty, I will have you scrubbing floors with a mop until you remember what medicine actually means." She letting the threat sink in, watching their faces carefully for understanding and respect. Then she smiled, a genuine, powerful smile that transformed her entire face from stern to warm. "Now, let's get to work. We have lives to save, and I have 30 years of knowledge to share." The camera slowly pans up, from the lecture hall to the hospital's main entrance and logo. The words St. Catherine's Medical Center, where mercy meets medicine, shine in the morning light. Then the screen fades gently to white, leaving only the echo of Bella's voice teaching the next generation. Do you think Bella should have revealed her identity sooner, or was she right to wait? Have you ever been underestimated because of your job or your background? Would you have had the courage to break through security and take over, like Bella did? Should hospitals value experience over credentials when lives are on the line? Share your thoughts and your own stories of being underestimated in the comments below. If this story healed your heart and reminded you that dignity matters more than titles, please like and subscribe. We bring you stories of justice, redemption, and the truth that mercy is the highest form of medicine. See you in the next story.